Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of In Lay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Ascari, and today we have the lovely Legally Purdy in with us. How are you doing, Purdy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to have you on. I've been not stalking you, but I've been watching you from space to space, I'm really glad that you agreed to come on. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on. I've also been listening to you lately with your recent interview on one of the Twitter spaces last weekend, and you had a lot of really good things to say, and people were pretty easy, pretty hard, and but they were nice in the end. So it was a little bit refreshing. But I have seen some of the negative side of what you've had to deal with just by virtue of being a PPC or so. My apologies on behalf of Canadians for that. But no, thank you for having me on. I think anybody who decides to throw their hat in the ring deserves a little bit of respect, and I applaud anybody who's doing what you do. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you. That was a hell of a confidence boost. So thanks for that.
It's all down
Uh,
here from here, though.
yeah, I know the truth tour is going to come out now.
That's right.
Uh, Legally, why don't we get started with? I always do this with guests. Like, if I want the audience to get to know who you are, and spaces, it's kind of like anonymous, more or less. Where were you born? Where were you raised? And what have you seen change across Canada throughout the decades that you've been with us?
Okay, so I was actually born and raised right here in Ottawa. White collar city girl. Both my parents worked for the feds. So I grew up with health and dental benefits. We had insurance, 100%. Both parents worked for the government. So, I mean, in terms of growing up with that, I just assumed everybody had medical coverage until I became a paramedic. So that was actually my first job out of school. Is I moved to Windsor to go to St. Clair College, and I was hired on as a paramedic in the late 90s. And a lot of people are shocked when they hear me say, not much has changed when it comes to our healthcare here in Canada since the 90s. And we can get into that in a little bit. So I went to high school here in Ottawa, went to a gifted school, had a gifted program back in the day. Lots of smart kids around me. It was awesome. And became a paramedic. And that wasn't exactly for me. I was 21 years old, working as a paramedic. And after a little bit of time, after a couple of years, that was it. And I did a lot of traveling. I had some medical incidences happen while I was paramedic. I mean, that would be a podcast in itself. So, I became very fickle and very, what's the word I'm looking for? I felt like there was a whole world to see and there was so much to do. And there was just being a paramedic at 21, just watching what I was seeing was just horrible. And I remember in the 90s hearing about cures for cancers, cures for diabetes, Dr. Banting working with certain doctors. And it was just hard to hear because the internet was in its infancy back then, right? And so finding this kind of information was literally driving to museums or libraries and, getting out documents from archives. And so I just started traveling the world, and everywhere I went, something peculiar would always happen that would trigger me to think. I was in South Korea. I went there to teach English. I was there during September 11th. September 11th, so in 2001. And I didn't hear the same story that everybody else was told here in North America. We were getting our news from China, from Japan, from South Korea, from different sources that have English speaking media. So I've always sensed some unease in this country, to answer that question, because I've been traveling by virtue of just having this need to learn and understand other people and what they're living. And it's interesting because I went to Greece my first trip. I was 16 years old. We went to the Peloponnese, and we saw the first Olympic stadiums, and just Greece, the awesomeness of Greece. And it's amazing when you see this beautiful country when you're 16 and them living so blasé. And then I'm watching my parents back home, both working for the government, doing the grind, getting to work, getting home. Like it was such a different, I don't know, experience at 16 to see, wait, are we doing it right? You know, are we really truly living sometimes? So I've always had um, this understanding that it's not perfect here. It could be better, and the people mean well, but it's not perfect. And Canadians are very, very lazy. I'm sorry. So yeah, so I lived a very traditional, you know, Ottawa, born and raised in Ottawa. My mom's French, my dad's, you know, my mom's French Irish, my dad's Scottish English. Like I'm the manja cake that Ottawa expects, you know. My kids go to French school, Franco. I'm fully bilingual, so but I do connect more with the French side of things, not Quebec French, just culturally. I'm very touchy feely. I'm very, you know, very French like that. I like to give two kisses. You're Iranian, so you know, right? Correct. You're Persian, correct?
Yep. Yeah.
So, very touchy feely as a culture.
Yeah, that's one of the things one of the very few things I liked about COVID. Like, there was no more hugs and kisses. Everyone just gets up and leaves when the dinner party's over. It's more streamlined. Yeah.
See, so my dad is from the Maritimes, so I am a traditional Maritimer when it comes to leaving the party, in that I say I'm leaving, but I'm like the person that ends up cleaning, you know, and still there. Because I always have something to say, which most people already know that about me. But no, I'm very tactile with affection, which is, I don't know, and it's very French, very European. Um, yeah, so there's just certain things. Food. I hate the Irish English food. You guys got way better food. Let's be real. So yeah, but anyways, so that's basically it. It's been a really really non-eventful in terms of, you know, growing up. It was just your traditional. I'm a Gen X kid, born in the 70s, you know, played on the streets in the 80s, you know. Yeah, that's basically all there really is to know.
Let's go back
Well,
to what you said
that's
about.
background that people don't probably already know anyways.
No, that's fine. I just want to pick up on what you said about healthcare. You said it hasn't changed since the 90s. How so?
I'll give you an example. When I was a paramedic, they started symptom relief drug. They started, so Toronto and BC, Vancouver, BC, I can't remember if it was I think it was the entire province of BC, but Metro Toronto and BC were the only ones that had full-fledged paramedics giving drugs, doing IV back in the 90s. And in Ontario, we introduced early on what was called symptom relief, and we were doing, you know, a certain 5 drugs, and you know, self-administering their own medication. We didn't do that before the 90s. In any event, in order to qualify for the symptom relief pilot project, you had to make the 8-minute response time. So you needed to get a 911 call and be dispatched on average within 8 minutes. Ottawa and Windsor couldn't make those times. Like, it was brutal. They couldn't make that time in the 90s. And this summer, an older woman riding her bicycle just kind of clipped the curb downtown here, Ottawa, and fell and had an immediate headache. And I saw how she fell. So, of course, I pulled my car over right away and I held neutral alignment. Guess how? And we're literally maybe a 7-minute drive to the Civic Hospital, which is the trauma hospital of Ottawa. Guess how long it took for a firefighter to show up, let alone a paramedic? 35 minutes.
Wow.
It took ambulance 38. And she's on the ground in it was chilly. And I've got people trying to get blankets. Like, I had to keep her mobilized because she had an immediate headache, like immediate. So I had to just hold her in place and wait for the medics to come and make sure she was fine. But This is Ottawa right now. So those times were the same. People say, "Oh, we didn't have hallway medicine in the 90s." Yeah, we did. I would spend hours and hours waiting to offload a patient. This has not changed. I left in 98 and nothing has changed. It's gotten worse, maybe. But yeah, nothing's changed, in my opinion.
Well, what about like what's your view on, let's just call it healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, paramedics. What's your view on what they did during COVID? Do you think you would have had more? First of all, do you agree with what they did? If you don't, do you think you would have had the integrity to stand up to it?
Yeah, that's a that's a tough question because everybody would respond differently based on their personal experience, their personal circumstances, right? Everybody was different. And I just want to say to that point, that is why common sense actually isn't that common, because you and I would and there's an actual reason, and it's because you and I would have to have a shared experience for our sense to be common. It's the whole nature and nurture, right? If you and I have lived in completely different worlds of nature and nurture, our common sense will fundamentally be different. And to draw an easier comparison is, you and I would need to have the same taste in food in order for your review to matter to me on TripAdvisor. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
if we don't have the same palate, just because 80% of people like it doesn't mean, and so that's kind of the same thing I find with common sense is we put too much emphasis on it when really we don't have a lot of it, because we all have different life experiences. So when it comes to the medical staff, the way they acted, to answer your question, I was livid, but I was more appalled at the legal profession. That's who I was mad at. There was a judge here in Ottawa who made a court order in family court forbidding a mother from advising her 14-year-old son on the pros and cons of this vaccine. She was court ordered to keep her mouth closed. Now, I would demand and expect our medical staff to speak out if we actually had the proper laws, particularly whistleblower protection laws, on the books to protect them. Unfortunately, we don't. Huffington Post reported, I think it was 2016 or 2021, I can't remember which year, there was a study done by American and British think tanks. There were 37 countries evaluated on a 20-point scale, and Canada ranked dead last. Our laws are such that they actually put people at risk for speaking out. And that was actually a comment, I think, that triggered you to actually invite me on the show, was I mentioned that was one of the biggest priorities I think any MP can introduce into the House under a private member's bill. We need something to protect these people. And so to demand somebody speak out, well, how about we demand the laws to protect these people first, have them protected legally, and then we can demand that they do that. But until then, we're ignorant and clearly don't understand human psychology if we don't understand why they did it. Do you know what I mean? We want to sit here and demand that they speak out for us, but there's no mechanism to protect them, and that's up to us to demand.
Yeah, you've given me a lot to think about. I got to temper my my assaults and attacks on the healthcare workers. But you're right. Even if there's one good person amongst them, they're not going to speak out if it's going to cost their career.
And Canadians are starting to develop an appetite for what we call whistleblowers. We have to keep in mind, look at the way Edward Snowden was treated. In his mind, he was telling the world about this overall crazy spying on Americans that was happening, and then by extension, all the Five Eyes. He didn't get the support that you would think somebody who thought he was doing what was best for Americans. He didn't get that, and neither did Assange, WikiLeaks. So there are some people who have put themselves out there, and the responses by the media and by large, social media influencers almost is an indication to the other Canadians, don't be talking out, because look what's going to happen, and do you want to hear my interesting whistleblower protection laws that got me thinking about it? Do you want to hear a really interesting story? It's interesting because your listeners can go research this, and I'll just tell it really quick. I was in Paris in 2016. We were leaving, and we were at Charles de Gaulle Airport, and I only weigh like 135, 37 pounds. So if my suitcases is over in weight, I will open all my suitcase up and I will balance them out, because there's no way my average 50-pound lighter than a man that's sitting on the plane is paying $200 for overage for luggage. I refuse, okay? So I'm waiting in line, and there's this woman behind me, and she's got just a backpack, and she's in like maybe her mid-30s, no makeup, just a backpack. And I turned to her to say, do you want to go ahead? I might be a minute, I'm very cognizant of the time I take from people. So I just kind of let them all go ahead of me, right? The airline's getting paid by the hour. They don't care, right? So she's like, no, go ahead. Our flight's delayed. It's all good. And back then, Iceland air traffic controllers were on strike. So, they were on work to rule because they're essential, because they wanted, I think it was like a 700% raise. But that's another story. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Just a minor raise.
Yeah, just a minor raise, because it's WOW Airlines. Like literally, when you book the price, and I saw me and my family afford a Paris Charles de Gaulle return for less than $2,000. I was like, wow. And I'm like, oh, that's why they're called WOW. Like it was perfect. So anyways, you've got to connect through Iceland, through Reykjavik. And so they're on this work to rule, and this woman. So when we get through the other side, she says to me, do you mind waking me up when they call boarding? She's like, I've got the Beyonce concert tonight in Washington. And this is June 10th, 2016. Okay. She's like, I've got the Beyonce concert in Washington tonight. I'm like, oh yeah, go to sleep. Go get your REM. Because anyone who travels knows you only sleep with one eye half asleep when you're waiting for a delayed flight. But if someone is guaranteed going to wake you up, you get into your REM and you're good, right? So I wake her up 4 hours later, and we're standing in the line. Now you got to keep in mind, this is Charles de Gaulle. There's like so many people. And I wake her up, and we're standing in line, and I finally like, so what do you do? Like, she's like, oh, I'm a human rights lawyer. And my husband at the time turns and goes, oh, she's going to write the LSAT next year. She wants to be a human rights lawyer as well. She wants to work for the UN. And this woman flips her head around, and she's like, no, you don't. You do not want to work for that evil corporation. Now, this is 2016. I have no idea about the WEF, I know nothing about any of this, right? And I've just had kids, and I started having kids in 2010. I got married in 2007. Like, I'm not in that world, right? And so I say, what? Anyways, who this woman ends up being is she is a lawyer from Hungary, who was part of a team of international lawyers who was just representing, they were in a farmhouse held up in Paris or somewhere in France for 4 days because a woman named Miranda Brown, who used to work for the UN, was testifying before the US Senate committee about the UN selling computer servers to Iran and North Korea. So they get mad at her, obviously, because the UN is doing this. Clearly, for those of you who don't know, there's sanctions to those two countries, and you're not allowed to sell them anything, specifically computer chips and servers. So they are. So she tries to expose that. They end up sending her to Fiji, where she tries to expose the fact that the UN peacekeepers in CAR, so the Central African Republic, are raping all the locals.
Okay. Let's slow this down a bit.
Yeah,
They send her to Fiji. Who's they?
UN, because she was in
Okay.
Geneva. She was She was posted in Geneva. This whole, you can look her up, Miranda Brown, and she got wind of these sales, selling servers to Iran and North Korea. So, anyways, I
And
meet her lawyer in
sorry,
Paris.
just for context for the audience, when you say the UN was selling servers to Iran and North Korea, how is the UN in the business of selling servers? Did they have information on them? Nobody knows. Oh, whatever. Anyway, carry on. You were saying that they were charged with sexually assaulting women.
So she brought that to the upper management attention, and they tried to silence her also for whistleblowing on that. So she was blowing the whistle on two major infractions, one can say, of the UN, and she was pretty much silenced until a team of lawyers, and then she was before a Senate committee. She literally testified in 2016. So the point and the moral of the story is I find myself in these random places in the world, coming to this, getting this information that completely redirects. Because clearly, when I went home, I looked it up. Of course, me and my husband are like, "Hey, what is she talking about? I have got her email, and they're creating a world, an international whistleblowing protection. They were planning on working on this in 2016, and it's been my plan this year to hunt down all of these lawyers and find out where they are at with this international body that is going to protect whistleblowers, so that if their home country doesn't have the laws to do so, this international body will step in." So I find that very interesting and intriguing, and all because the Icelandic air traffic controllers were losers and wanted an obscene raise. And it's not something you think to look up. You don't just think to Google, so how corrupt is the United Nations peacekeepers? And I already knew
Yeah.
they were a little bit corrupt. Like, there were some problems with the way some of the UN peacekeepers were treated back in the 60s and the whole Agent Orange thing, but that's a whole other story. Yeah. So, that's my bit on, you don't want to like be a conspiracy theorist, but when you just find yourself in random places in the world and information coming to you, it's like, who and what wants me to know this and why? And it's hard to ignore.
I think it's something that the Christians say it's God's plan.
Well, it is something that I would say, but I know that sometimes making religious comments can be off-putting to some. So it's like this. I mean, I have a Bible right here, but it's it's definitely. Yeah, it's definitely, I don't know. It's hard to ignore. And it's happened multiple times. Like, why was I in South Korea moments away, like minutes from a US Navy base in Chile, spending a whole bunch of time on base and hearing a lot of different stories. Anyways,
I
I don't know.
my one takeaway from your story, I'm wondering why they didn't just assassinate that lady. That's typically what they do with whistleblowers when it's a big story.
Good question. Because she was,
Maybe they
I don't
tried.
know. Because maybe, well, the ones who tend to do the assassinating were probably happy to hear that Iran and North Korea were no longer getting. You see what I mean? Like,
Oh, I see.
she
Yeah.
would upset the UN, but there's a whole other side that would be very happy that they were no longer.
Basically, if they were selling servers to Ukraine, she'd probably be dead already.
See what I mean? So it depends. It depends on who. It's all. If there's anything we've learned, it's all interlinked. All of it, everything.
I wanted to one thing you mentioned before getting on this UN thing. You mentioned the laws, the legal profession is what really bothered you. The case of the judge ruling that the mother couldn't whatever advise on vaccine, this, that, and the other. This stuff happens. I go in and I read the case, and it sounds like the most objective, the most professional judge. Like they know how to write their summaries so they come across as objective. And then you talk to legal scholars or just lawyers, and they'll twist logic into a pretzel to make you believe that what they did was technically right, which is it is. Like the law is there, they're interpreting it in a certain way. But then for people like you and me, like citizens, we look at that, we're like, that can't be the purpose of the law. Like we don't make laws so that judges take away parental rights. Do you agree with my position? Disagree?
100%. Yeah, no, fully. I think that is a very big issue I have with lawyers, because they're the ones who pretzeled it with their legal arguments, right? You like in Quebec, they practice civil law. So you understand the code, you memorize it. That's what's going to happen. There is an air of predictability in Quebec. There is an air of chances are this is how it's going to play out because this is what the civil code says. The rest of mental Canada decides that the law is the person who is who is right in law is the person who is most up to date with the most recent case. So if somebody went to law school 25 years ago but doesn't keep up on case law, it doesn't matter. Like you're not important to me. Do you understand what I mean? Like, because an argument that may have worked for 20 years, a lawyer's going to come up with a new one tomorrow that's going to twist it.
No, I understand what you. Sorry if you can hear my dog going crazy.
No, I can't.
Tennis ball. You're talking about common law, and I ask lawyers, I'm like, how can you have a legal system that's growing in perpetuity? Like it just keeps bigger and bigger and bigger, and I'm like, how are you going to get people to self-represent?
So that's my biggest issue is access to justice and the ability for self-rep litigants to actually self-rep. We have made our system so convoluted, and the delays itself is the problem with our access to justice. People are forced to settle because they can't get a court date. And specifically civil law or tort. The David and Goliath situation, Goliath is winning because David can't get to court for a couple of years. If David could get to court within 6 months to a year, way less settlements would be happening. And to me, that's intentional because there's no way you cannot not know. You need to hire more judges, staff, support staff, clerks, whatever you need to do. Do it and clear the backlog. And we don't have access to justice. If you can't get a court date for 3 years, you've suffered a slip and fall, you haven't worked, and you can't afford your chiropractic payment because those are actually out of pocket. Those aren't covered, right, by OHIP anywhere in Ontario. But you got to wait 3 years for the insurance company to finally settle. What person who's injured has that amount of time? And sorry, where are all the lawyers on this matter? Where are all the tort lawyers when it comes to drawing attention to the fact that our system isn't working? Oh, is it because you're licensed and you're not allowed to hold the profession in disrepute? Well, therein is the problem. You know, I cannot believe the amount of lawyers we have, and we still have people, actual murderers, walking on technicalities because our criminal justice system couldn't try them in the allotted time frame as outlined by the Supreme Court. Like, what? A judge in Saskatoon, actually, I don't know his name, I should look it up, lost his mind today, or she, because there was a motion filed by the Crown today, and it's a murder trial, and he really got upset with the delays. So more judges, more lawyers, more crowns. I blame them all. They're all equally accountable for the lack of justice in this country. It's abhorrent. And what's even more abhorrent is all the criminals know this. They know how to work the system, whereas people like me and you are stuck picking up the pieces.
Yeah, it's almost impossible for like small guy to go up against the government, because you gave the David and Goliath analogy. I mean, if you want to continue that, if David won, it would be like if Goliath came and delivered stones to David, and like taught him how to use a slingshot, and then maybe even punched himself in the face. Like, they're taxing us, they're using our money to fight us. It's kind of a strange thing.
Oh, tax. Don't get me started on tax. Okay. Like,
Well, hold on, we'll get there. I
yeah,
just want to
no.
give
It's
a
just interesting that, yeah, no, for sure.
So I want to say hello to Kirk Reese. Kirk he's actually a whistleblower. He's the one that exposed money laundering. Basically, they're stealing money at L'Orange military base, and I think that was 2019. His life is destroyed. Like, he's hiding off out in a boat in BC right now, and they couldn't use the legal system against him, because then he gets his day in court and it becomes official record. So they just use the CRA to crush him.
It's so typical. And most Canadians didn't believe that happened to us. Most Canadians were under the impression that their neighbors, friends, and family, the ones that go to the work for the government, because everybody always likes to just say the government does it. But we have to remember the government is filled with your friends, family, and neighbors. It's not like we were taken over by some foreign entity and they've brought their government in. No, these are fellow Canadians doing this to us. So how Kirk is being treated is not by the government, it's by fellow Canadians.
Take the case of Helen Bruce. You know
Yes,
her, right?
she's back to court next week. I don't know if you
Yeah.
know that. She's back.
Well, I'm not following it as closely as I should. I mean, I got million other things, but
of course.
like there's a case of it's happening right before our eyes. They're ruining this woman's life because she tried to do the right thing, and because you and I, either we don't care or we don't have time. We're enabling this sort of behavior to continue. We're almost endorsing the government in doing this.
Yeah, no, you can't include me because I've been at pretty much most of her hearings.
Good for you.
Actually, Rob sent me a message on WhatsApp wondering if I was going to be there next week, because when him and I were there back in, was it May or March? March, I think it was March. Like it was explosive in there, and the accusations the defense counsel was lobbying at the prosecutor, which were reasonable accusations based on the evidence and the language that was used in some of the emails. But I remember Rob and I, we ran out of the tribunal space to do a quick video, and I was shaking in the video. It was so obscene. But I will say, I did see Helen a couple of weeks ago. Believe it or not, she was doing off duty. So she was doing. We have an obscene amount of construction in Ottawa right now, and so they've got police who how they have police that monitor construction, so they get paid like time and a half to do off duty. So she was there doing off duty. So she's back on the job. I saw her in the courthouse, maybe May or June. She was there for a case. So she's back on the job, but they are looking, I think they took money, doctor pay and things like that. So many people in Ottawa are enabling it because this is an Ottawa police issue. And I was disappointed that more people weren't shocked at a police officer doing her job.
Most people don't know. I mean, if I have not you and me, but in my immediate circle, if I have 25 people and I go to my friends and family and I ask them and I tell them this is happening, they won't believe it's happening.
No. And you have to show them videos.
They'll never watch it.
No, there was a lot. I'm in Ottawa, so yeah, no, it trust nobody knows. You're right, nobody.
It's almost like willful ignorance.
Well, that's the lazy part I was referring to.
Legally, I want to go. Yeah, it is lazy. I want to go to the comments. There's a couple of funny ones. So again, Kirk, this is why there aren't enough judges. There's not. It's hard to find enough corrupt judges and lawyers to fill the vacancies.
You know what, Kirk? You're right.
Uh,
That's a very good. Although not enough is. I mean, I might have agreed with that before, but I don't know. The way Canadians have been quick to jump to the being the 51st state. I don't know. It might be a lot easier to find corrupt judges and lawyers. A lot easier than I think I even knew, and I thought it was easy. What's the other comment?
oh, the other one's. This is. I actually interviewed this woman. She's a huge natural rights supporter, and I'm actually leaning that way. Justice cannot and does not exist in commerce law, and then her. I think that's like common law. Or maybe admiralty law. Common commerce law exists in the land of fiction. Lawyers, judges, RCMP. Politicians all suffer from split personality disorder. One of those personalities being made of legal paper. Um, I've actually had her on, and like a couple of years ago, this whole natural law thing, capital letters, corporation, like it didn't resonate with me. But now I'm thinking like this can't be the purpose of law to just enslave me.
So, that was one of the most disappointing things I learned. So I actually went back to school in 2022. Yeah, 2022. When I saw people getting arrested for protesters, I was beside myself. I was like, how is this happening? So I went back to school actually, and I took the paralegal program. And yeah, let's just say I didn't get licensed for a reason, and I won't license with the Ontario Law Society. There's no way I will give them authority over my life. Not happening. Zero chance. No.
I had Sean Buckley on. I thought I saw the guy's the National Citizens Inquiry, question and answer guy, but my God, he's like a constitutional expert. If you watch the episode, he's just running circles around me. But I'm starting to come to the understanding that the problem is the law schools. Like when you're in university, you have this under appearance of like, oh, these judges and lawyers, prosecutors, they magically come from the sky from somewhere else. They don't come from these law schools. But these law schools are polluting their minds.
So I don't know where the pollution is coming from, to be honest, because my experience in my paralegal program, it was very balanced, and to the point that it annoyed some of my fellow students because it was like our professors couldn't agree on things. One would say one thing and one would say another. And it was interesting because it got to the point where one would say something and then we'd ask the other one a few days later to get their interpretation. And it became very obvious very quickly. Whoever could argue quickly and efficiently and on your feet were more likely to win the argument in the end. And it didn't really matter if you completely destroyed the original intent of what the law says and what it was intended, because you and I will read case law and we will understand the intent. It's the lawyers who muck it up and put, like, why do they use these words? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why are we still using mens rea? Can we just say intent? Like, can we just get rid of the Latin? Can we just use words that people understand?
What about that infamous semicolon in our charter? You know what I'm talking about?
No, I'm assuming it's depending on where it was is changing the structure of the meaning of the sentence.
Well, at the beginning of the charter, there's a line that says, this charter is written under the supremacy of God and the rule of law, semicolon. And Brian Peckford has to always remind people. He's like, that semicolon means everything else is subject to this. I'm like, why did you just say that? Why did you have to put a stupid semicolon? Nobody uses that.
So that's the thing. Like, I had never even heard that, but I assumed it was arguing how the sentence was then interpreted after the fact, because that is exactly what lawyers do. Like if it's an and, comma, and, comma, like, or semicolon, you have to have all those items. But if it's an or, you only need to have one of those items. Like when you have all these test cases, sometimes you have to have all aspects of the test case. Sometimes you just need to have one. So lawyers are trained to find the path of least resistance and the fastest way of getting their argument across, right? Least amount of time. So what happens too is a really lousy judge will make a ruling, and then it sets precedent.
Yeah, that precedent thing is always it's a pain in the ass. And like uh sometimes it goes in our favor, like the Mosley decision, but then even then they kind of appealed it. So
Yeah, I don't even. I personally don't know how if they even got. I don't know. I've been meaning to add this to my list of things to look up. Do you even know if they were granted leave? Were they given leave to appeal? Are they working on their appeal documents as we speak?
the Mosley thing?
Yeah.
So they appealed it before they could have even possibly read it. Like they appealed it within 20, 30 minutes. Christopher
No, that.
Freeland came out.
Yeah, no, that part I know. But was it approved by the government? Like, is it going to the appeal stage? Like, that's the part I don't
I
know.
can't answer that.
Yeah,
I don't
that's the
know.
part I want to know. Because a few legal scholars. I'm not a legal scholar. I've been reading legal documents since as long as I can remember. My first job while I was waiting to get into being a paramedic was working in a law firm. So I was 18 working at a law firm. So you develop an understanding of legal jargon when you're exposed to it, right? When you're exposed to it, you're going to pick it up every time, it kind of circulates in the news or in newspapers or magazines. So I've always kind of been, a hobbyist in the law, let's just say, right? Like always been interested in understanding what it means and how they're to be applied. Because I've always had jobs where there were laws and people's lives at risk. I've had several. And governments and acts and statutes are in place. So I've always kind of understood that part. But lawyers tend to, yeah. When I think about the law and how it's mangled every day, it's infuriating.
So you know how they say that ignorance of the law is no defense?
Yeah.
It's a whatever. It's a general statement,
Yeah.
right? And it's
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, but then you can't have like 50,000 laws, each of them 100 pages long. How could I not be ignorant of the law? Like it's not possible.
Exactly. That's one thing I've always said about like Revenue Canada. Ignorance of tax law doesn't mean you can, whatever. And I'm like, okay, but let's try to argue that one day, because understanding tax law, it's insane. And why, like, look at the US, same thing, right? Like, why is it so complicated to understand something that is part of our lives on the regular?
We need some like really basic principles that sort of supersede law. So like if the government charges you with a crime or like whatever, even
Yeah.
contravention of regulation, if you can prove that another politician is doing the same thing, that politician should be fast tracked and charged first. Because
Right.
there's too many laws. Like every day you're breaking a couple of hundred laws probably.
Exactly. Yeah. And then we try to put powers to restrict people from doing things. Then we're giving other, branches more power. And it's just like we're constantly spinning. Bruce Party is absolutely the best at explaining where things have gone wrong. Yeah, I'm actually a fan of Bruce Party. I was a fan of him before I even was involved in any of the Freedom Convoy or any of my tweeting last year. I actually had reached out to him through Twitter when I was in school to be a paralegal because of the election, the bencher election that was going on with the Law Society here in Ontario. It was wild. Absolutely wild. I have a child who's walking in front of me. Stand by for a moment. Yes. Just get the charger. Grab the charger. And it's funny because I told her, grab everything you need now before I go live on the air. And here it is, only 44 minutes since she was able to, now she's running away, totally red. And I'm probably equally red. But do you have teenagers? Do you have kids? I don't even know. Do you have kids?
No, no kids, no wife, no life.
Oh. Life is simple, my guy. My guy, when you're tired, I don't ever have to hear you complain about being tired then, because people with no children who say they're tired, I'm like, go to bed. Like, no one needs to be fed, bathed, cleaned, ensured their teeth are bright. Like, just go to bed, you know? Okay, sorry. Where were we before I was distracted
I
there?
was gonna say, with regard to Bruce Party, I always say, in party we trust.
Oh yeah, I was absolutely blown away by what was going on internally at the Law Society during this bencher election. And I reached out to him because he was a bencher and a Queen's professor. So I reached out to him just wanted to pick his brain. And he was really good at answering. Like he'll answer people. And I was like, literally nobody. This is before I ever tweeted to me. Not that I'm anybody now, but Bruce might answer me now just by virtue. Now we have like a texting back and forth. And if a Supreme Court of Canada ruling comes out, I'll usually send it to him and asking, send me your article when you produce one on this topic, because sometimes when I don't know, there were a few recent decisions. I forget that. I think it was a Powers one. Like, I'm on the fence with it, and then so is he, and then he's got colleagues who are in a different position and how they feel about this. So there is like a split on how people are feeling about a Supreme Court of Canada, a recent one that was out, I think, July or August. So, I mean, even new decisions are causing confusion. But Bruce, he most definitely takes a pragmatic, a logical approach to a lot, which I appreciated a lot in him. I think he's a very, very smart man. I like him. I like him a lot. He's thumbs up.
I find that Canada, you have three different wings. So you have the psychotic wing on the left, like the progressives, the communists. Let's put them aside, and then you have this tension between. I'm going to use the word libertarian. So you got the more libertarian, limited government ones like Bruce Party, and then you have the more traditional conservative ones like Leighton Gray, and that's sort of the tension. I'm trying to see where Canada will land between those two different ideas.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I I didn't realize I was a libertarian until recently. I thought I just kind of ran down the middle, but libertarians are like literally down the middle. Which, I did a survey. It was quite long. It was like 25, 30 minutes, just to see where I actually fell. And I was like literally on the line.
Really?
Yeah, like, and below authority at the top of libertarian. Like it's like when I did that left brain, right brain test, and then there's the audio and the visual part of the brain, and like literally my dot was right in the middle. So it wasn't surprising. But yeah, no, I'm limited government for sure. But at other times we sit here and talk about how we need laws to protect people. So this is where I find myself kind of jekyling and hiding it sometimes in how I feel about things, because we want to let capitalism do its thing and corporate whatever, but at the same time, there's a lot of shady stuff going on there that's having a negative impact. All these companies who are, literally avoiding paying taxes, tax evasion, not even tax avoidance, bona fide head office in Panama or, in Bahamas, whatever. And yet our hospitals are suffering because of that. You and I are paying taxes because billion-dollar corporations have tax lawyers to help them shell them, literally. And so that's what's hurting me and you. Normally I wouldn't care. You guys do what you want to do, but the fact is that you're actually taking away from what is needed, and that those money pay for infrastructure, pay for all the public services, right? We still need that paid for by somebody. We don't want all of our roads to be pay roads. right? Like imagine, you know? So sometimes I'm a libertarian. Sometimes I'm like, well, we kind of need some laws to protect whistleblowers. So you
It's a
see where the
tough one.
conflict.
Yeah, and it gets even more complicated because none of this works if you don't have like a moral citizenry. So if take the Middle East, like third world countries, specifically the Middle East, there is almost it's almost accepted that you can sell out your integrity if it's going to get you a buck. They do this in Mexico too. This is why there's so much corruption. Whereas in Canada, it used to be, now thanks to the liberals, we're like the third world. But in Canada, it used to be like there was a stigma associated with corruption and lying to make a buck. But if you don't have that, then you need more and more laws to fill in, and it just snowballs. It gets worse and worse.
Well, Canada's now become known amongst the criminal underground as the Dubai of the Middle East because
Oh,
Dubai is.
just to be clear, Canada is no longer corrupt; it's criminal. We've entered a new realm.
Yeah, it's full on criminal, like full on, like, and criminals know that we don't have the laws to do a lot of things. We don't have we didn't have the laws to go after 5 separate companies that were in Vancouver that were making cell phones that were so highly encrypted. It took, was it the French and Interpol to get involved, and then they were extradited. 5 of these guys were out of Vancouver because we don't have the laws in Canada to actually try them because freedom of speech in Canada. True fact, true story. And so they had to be extradited to the US. So people, criminals, have known this for decades, that they can extort our criminal market because we don't actually, it's just like their foreign interference. We don't actually have the laws on our books to go after anybody who was involved in it. We do not have that on the books. It's just
Meanwhile, if
like,
you and I we peacefully protest, we go to jail for like 20 years.
right? That's literally why I went back to school in the paralegal program to try to figure this out. And then, well, now we've all just figured out it's all by design, right? It's not meant for me and you.
How are you doing for time? We're at 52 minutes.
I'm good. Yeah, we can cut her off, I guess, in 8, 10. Is Are people?
No, there's no more questions, which makes me believe that YouTube shut it down. but
Oh, do you think they did? What did I say?
no, I don't know. I'm just assuming because there was like a whole flurry of questions coming in. The viewers have gone up, but then it stopped. Um, One last thing I want to get your opinion on Coots. Like, where do you land on the Coots 4? We're
That's
gonna
a
need more
whole.
than 10 minutes.
That's okay. And I got, I'm good. I yeah, I have a different. I think there was. I think there was an intelligence aspect to what happened at Coots. I believe that. I think there was a CSIS RCMP intelligence operation. I think there's more to the story. Um, I've asked questions that have really upset people because, well, no one can answer them or provide the evidence I've asked for. I'm very suspicious about the narrative we've been given about some of the things that have happened at Coots.
Do you want me
There
to
was
tell
there
you?
were
Do you want me to give you the?
CSIS informants working there, and I'm not talking about the ones who testified. I'm talking about the ones that we know by other people. Their roommates were interviewed by CSIS.
Jeez.
So it's a big spider web. I think there is way more to the Coots story than meets the eye. Personally, people give me a hard time about this. I don't care. I haven't really spent most of my life listening to what other people think, so I'm not really going to start, I like to hear what they think, but you're not going to call me crazy for thinking something's up with Coots, because there's more evidence of what CSIS has done historically, particularly the Heritage Front and that whole 90s operation. The fact that characters from that operation in the 90s are popping up now, come on. How can the same people from something that happened in the late 90s be reappearing in what appears to be an intelligence gathering operation? It was a release valve, in my opinion, for brewing extremism in Canada, frustration. There's a lot of coke moving out of Coots.
Yeah, no.
I mean, even Kirk, he's talked about that, the drugs, the Liberal Party, all of that going on out west. So, I mean, I'm in Ontario, so I never even heard of Coots, Alberta before this happened, right? And I was married to an Albertan. I've been to Alberta, and Coots just, but recently, there's been a lot of drug busts in Lethbridge and in that area, and I don't know if it's the RCMP trying to make good with, Donald Trump and some of his threats, but I think, do you think it's weird? Don't you find it weird, some of the things that have happened? Like
I'll tell you
Marco
what I
being charged 6 months after the fact? Like, it just, how do you charge the leader last for the Coots? Like, there's just so much that just doesn't make any logical sense. Okay, here, I'll give you September 11th. Okay, we're not getting into it, but World Trade Center Building 7 collapsed, right? You had 1 and 2, Pentagon, but then you also had that World Trade Center Building number 7 that was right beside 1 and 2 that also collapsed. Now, that's weird. And the fact that in 2001, the most secure place in the world, the Pentagon, only had 5 frames of an aircraft flying into the Pentagon, which, by the way, wasn't an airplane. It was a drone loaded, because I've worked in aviation, and airplanes don't just disappear into thin air once they've hit a wall. There was no airplane anywhere. Go back and look at the pictures. There's no airplane. And there'd be like 50,000 liters of fuel on board, and the plane took off. It was going to LA. It was 5 hours. It was only an hour in the air. So 80% of fuel on board. They would have literally had to completely rip up the entire front lawn of the Pentagon and done soil remediating, because I worked in soil remediation for a little bit in Toronto, and I understand the importance of not contaminating the ground. Imagine how much fuel would have contaminated the ground. So if you take that and you go, okay, those two things don't make sense, then that automatically makes someone like me go, then none of the other stuff makes sense either then. Because if you're going to lie about World Trade Center 7 and you're going to lie about the Pentagon, then I'm not going to believe you about the other stuff, because you can't give me half truths, because if you're lying about one part, you're lying about the other. So Coots, there's way too much secrecy. This envelope, this witnesses, these didn't have wiretaps. Why? You're going to tell me your confidential, your undercover cops are not wearing wires in 2022? Come on. So it's all of that shadiness that makes the whole thing seem shady. And I'm not saying the guys didn't do anything wrong. Like I don't know. I don't know. There was a publication ban. We have very few people actually releasing the information that was evidenced, so it's just, I don't know, that looked like a pipe bomb in a box, that picture. That doesn't seem like something that you and I would own. Do you know what I mean?
My view is this: they, for whatever reason, maybe Joe Biden pressured Trudeau. They wanted to invoke the Emergencies Act. They needed an excuse, so they came up with a lie. They laundered it through antihate.ca, and then these four boys got caught up in this basically national security experiment to try to invoke the Emergencies Act, and they've just been destroyed. Now, that's not to say that they didn't do anything illegal or stupid. I think one of them had a handgun. This pipe bomb query, I don't know. Like I'm not running these guys for federal office. I'm just looking at this stuff, and I think they wanted a pretext to invoke the Emergencies Act, and they used this, and this is why you're seeing all this publication ban and all this
So
stuff.
I think that Ottawa was supposed, there was some, so there has been several people involved in the Ottawa side of things who um, have said that there was supposed to be an event that was supposed to happen in Ottawa that would cause the triggering of the Emergencies Act.
That would be better, yeah, for them.
But because nobody in Ottawa was going to do anything, nobody was going to drive a truck into the Parliament buildings because, well, it was under construction and you wouldn't get too far when you'd fall down, and because there's like a wall and it's all dug up like a
What do they call that? A moat? A
a
moat?
moat. Yeah, that's it, like a moat, right? So it's like, where are you going? You're not getting that truck anywhere. And maybe once they got to Ottawa and realized the building was under construction, they couldn't really storm it. I don't know what the plan was, but I have heard from reliable people that something was supposed to happen in Ottawa. And because it didn't happen in Ottawa, they created an incident in Coutts.
I mean, if you just think about it, this is what never made sense to me. I'm like, so there's something happens in Coots and you invoke the Emergencies Act in Ottawa? Like, and I can't believe that the people, first of all, they accepted that, but nobody else said, like, wait a minute, this doesn't pass the smell test.
But nobody said it doesn't pass the smell test when it came to the vaccines,
Touche.
right? I mean, I'm vaccinated. I'll admit it. I was terrified, and I've gone into long reasons why I got vaccinated. I was terrified of the virus. I was a flight attendant during SARS in 2003, 2004 in Toronto. So this was triggering for me. I had kids now. You know, it was different. Again, back to common sense, right? People's different life experience was going to determine their trust and their faith in the medical profession, right? That is completely gone for me now. It was somewhat gone already. It is fully gone now. And to that point, my family doctor also left the profession. He was appalled at how it was handled. He had friends on the advisory committee, and he was telling me how livid he was with them. And because I used to be a paramedic, he knew that I didn't have my phone in my purse ever recording him or going to catch him in something he said. So he's quite candid with me. So I've had a really good, solid relationship with my family doctor until he left in 2023. Yeah.
I'll never forget this interaction I had with this nurse. She was quite attractive, actually, but I went in to get my COVID. I wasn't vaccinated to fly. You had to do that whole like Star of David thing where they have to do your test. And then she said to me, she's like, this whole vaccination thing is just an absurd joke. And I said the same thing. And then the conversation went to immigration. She was Iranian as well. And she's like, yeah, these Iranians are just coming in and milking the system. And I'm like, oh my God, I gotta put a ring on this thing. This woman's amazing.
Yeah, there's nothing best than like a Persian calling out Iranians, eh?
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, but was it the Saudi prince that recalled all of the Saudis back in like 2015 or 16? Remember, all the Saudis had to go back home?
I remember there was a falling out with Canada. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so all the Saudis had to leave Canada, or they were like not good with their
Well,
home
that's because
country.
Trudeau's an idiot. He's like, there's so much sexism in Saudi Arabia. We stand for women's rights. I'm like, dude, shut the F up. Like, don't do this on an international scale. This is not, this isn't your toys you're playing with. It's our country.
And it's so funny, and you can work with me here because so I didn't catch the beginning of your interviews when you were on that space, um, dinner time, right, with kids. Um, were you born? You were born in Canada. You're first generation Canadian, or were
No,
you?
no, I was born in Iran in '83, and I left in '87. I got here in '89, so I've been here most of my life.
Okay,
But yeah,
so
like my point is, I wasn't born here. No,
no, okay. So you weren't born here, but okay, but I find it interesting when Canadians think that that part of the world is nothing but desert. And I'm like, you guys, like, we're so poor here. Like, like we don't, and I say poor in that, you look at Bahrain, you look at Saudi, you look at Qatar, you look at Dubai, yo, boats, cars, 15-foot ceilings.
Russian
You know,
supermodels,
was that?
Russian supermodels.
No, but right. Come on, Brazilians are better looking than the Russian supermodels. Let's be real. Come on now. Anyways, I'm always for the Brazilian women. Always like, you go Brazilians. But the, like Canadians, like, okay, if you live in Ottawa, there's nobody in Ottawa who's rich, because if you were that rich, you wouldn't live in Ottawa. Okay, number one. Number two, there's not a lot of rich Canadians. Most of them live in Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal. And that's evidenced when, like in the States, people will see a cool car and they'll be like, yo, bro, can I take a pic with your car? Here in Canada, we're like, that guy's got a small one. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
it's the cheap Bugatti.
right? Like Canadians are so jealous and they think they got it. And I'm like, yo, like, go to Bahrain and go hang out in a club. Go to Beirut. Like, you think it's beautiful here? Come on. Like, I trust me, I'm a Canadian. I love my country, but I hate ignorant Canadians who just think the Middle East is guys on a camel. And I'm like,
It's there's a dangerous side effect of that. So you said everyone thinks that the Middle East is desert. So they think that the corruption and the chaos can only happen in places that are desert. I've been all over the Middle East. They have mountains, they have snow, they have beautiful forests. And when I look around British Columbia and I look at these trees, I'm like, that could happen here. Like just because your nature is beautiful, that's not a shield against tyranny and authoritarianism.
correct. Look at Pakistan. Pakistan has amazing mountains.
North
Pakistan is
Korea. Yeah.
beautiful. But the ISI, I'm sorry, not enough Canadians understand. I don't even think our officials understand the impact of the ISI. And I'm a little more concerned about them. And what's the name of their terrace? Lahora?
I'm not up to date with my terrorism.
They're like old school terrorists, man. Like, oh yeah, Pakistani ISI. Like, yeah, they cause a little bit of problems for us and everybody over there. It's yeah, no, but Pakistan's beautiful. Look at the mountains.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they got, what's that one? Isn't K2 in Pakistan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go on record saying this. My geography is horrible,
I'm
but
pretty
but
sure
they do
K2.
have
Hey, Coral, can you Google
Kash,
K2?
Kashmir. Kashmir is a mountainous territory, right?
Yes. K2 mountain. Where is it? Can you Google that for me?
You can't ask your kids to do work off screen and then yell at them when they come to pick something up.
She's walking by again. Yeah, no. Yeah, they think because Canada, you're right, is beautiful. That's why it's going to stay safe. And well, there's lots of corrupt, beautiful countries around the world. Look at Africa.
Colombia comes to mind under Pablo Escobar.
Look at Venezuela. Venezuela was the richest South American country until what, early 2000s, because Chavez was elected in 99. Things got a little squirrely, but I was there in 96. And let me tell you, Venezuela was rich. Margarita Island, come on, lapping it up. Cuba, same thing. In the 20s was America's playground. but America gets their mitts involved and everything gets messed up. And now they're coming after us. I don't think he's joking. He stressed me out today when he said he's not going to make us the 51st state. He's just going to make the border and disintegrate
Well,
economically.
they already have with NAFTA. They've basically taken over the country. They're telling us what to do. I don't. he's,
This
he's
is
just stating the
yeah.
obvious. Yeah.
He's talking about this a bit too much for my understanding. Like for my liking. Like the first few times it was kind of funny, Bayman, but it's kind of starting to stress me out a little bit.
It's his style. Like he'll say something and everyone's like, yeah, and then he'll just keep saying it until there's diminishing returns. So you'll stop eventually, like that Ron the Sanctimonious thing,
Yeah.
which actually I find
he
hilarious.
does get really good catchwords. I mean, you got to give him that.
He gets good. Yeah, he does. He does. What else did he say? Lock her up. Big beautiful coal. Big beautiful black coal. All right. Why don't we? Because I know you might have other things to do. I'm just going to go to the comments and we'll end it. I think it was the whole Saudi Arabia thing. Trudeau calls people misogynists, hates women, but can't define what a woman is. Just that he's a male feminist. Yeah, that's a lot of wisdom in there. Canada is amongst the world's most corrupt nations. We are a limited hangout of a country. The corruption in Canada makes the corruption in those developing countries seem cute. There's something that Trudeau is doing well. I think that's it. Yeah, I don't know. Do you want to tell the audience where they can go to follow you, find out more about you?
I am mainly on Twitter. At this juncture, hopefully that will eventually change and get this whole socials, rumbles, and all of that figured out. Us boomers. Well, I guess I'm Generation X. I'm not really a boomer.
You're not a boomer. Come on.
Yeah, no, just Gen X. I gotta get with that and start figuring out. But just at Legally Purdy on Twitter for now. And yeah, I like to put out a little bit of commentary, get people to think, I ask questions, I put information out there. Some people don't like the commentary, but it's meant to just get people engaged and thinking outside the box and outside of groupthink. If we could get people outside of the groupthink, that would be a good start. And, just everyone thinking, before we go, everyone thinking that Trudeau resigned yesterday, right? Like everyone had to come back and walk it back and go, yeah, right. No, he didn't actually resign. He's going to resign once we get all this other stuff figured out. So when that is, who really knows, right? He could be prime minister for the next 6 months. So does that really count as a resignation? Right? Like, so the state of the country was very easily explained yesterday when people could listen to words where he said, I intend to resign. And everyone is all confused about whether or not he resigned. Like, that is the state of our country when we can't even figure it out if that was a resignation speech or not. What does it mean? Where are we at? Government's prorogued. Trump takes office on the 20th. Like,
I get you.
Be more of a shit show? Like, really? Like,
I guarantee you, yesterday the number one Googled word was probably prorogue. I could have gone my entire life never knowing that was a word.
It probably was, because after Brexit vote, 2 most Googled questions after Brexit in the UK. 1, what is Brexit?
Right.
2, are you ready for it?
What is Britain?
Close. What is the EU?
Oh, come on. They should know that.
So you wonder why they've got, I don't know what's going on with this whole situation that's happened recently with the mistreatment of young girls. I don't want you to get blocked on any of your channels here. That's recently blown up today. It's happening in London.
The Muslim rape gangs.
Yeah. Are you up to speed on this?
I used to live in England. I can tell you what the root cause is.
Can you please?
Yeah, it's they have 2 different, how do I put this delicately? there's two different cultures in England. You have the law-abiding citizens, let's say, and then you have the lawless group. You ever seen that Brad Pitt movie Snatch?
Yes.
So remember the phrase that they use to define them? They call them a pikey,
Pikey, yeah.
pikey, chav. It's just it's a slang they use. That they don't like being called that. It's very offensive. But they're kind of ostracized. They pushed out of society. They live in welfare housing called council estates, and like whatever happens in there, it's like a ghetto. So nobody cares. So you have this ghetto where law enforcement doesn't go in, and these people they live with their own rules. You add to that, you bring in these dangerous men that happen to be Muslims in this case, and those Muslim men took advantage of these at-risk girls that the law enforcement just, for historic reasons, they're just like, we don't care about these people, they're less than human. So it was just a perfect storm, and these girls just got completely taken advantage of. And it's sad, they're very young.
Wow. And this is happening in the UK, not in Kenya, Central African Republic,
Yeah,
places where you would traditionally, expect corruption.
So Wolf is saying, yeah, no-go zones. Thank you, Wolf. Very succinct. I was rambling.
So they're called no-go zones by the police or anybody. They just stay away because they're so rough, they're so dangerous.
Well, they're not called no-go zones. They're council estates, but they are essentially no-go zones. Paris has these too with the North Africans. The thing is, like, yes, as Wolf said,
Where?
Islam
Are you
teaches
talking
you.
about arrondissement du Street?
Well, they have ghettos in Paris with the North Africa. Remember they had a riot a couple of years back?
Yeah, that's
It's
in
the
like
same
the
thing.
18th and the 19th, and it's almost outside of Paris. I know that exact. It's near Montmartre. It's. I know the exact region. Yeah, I do recall seeing police in that area though. Always.
I just wanted to add something so people
Yeah,
don't
interesting.
think I'm skirting the issue. Uh, Wokeism has a big part with this because the police, they don't want to come across as racist, so they find out that the perpetrators are Muslims, and they're like, well, let's give them a pass. No, the victims are young girls. You must never give them a pass.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do we explain the all the Catholic priests then for years? Because that's not that
Uh,
happens here in Canada. Like whenever people are quick to jump on other people, I'm like, yeah, us Anglo-Saxons, we weren't too good to people here in Canada. Like yeah, I think that a society over here decides that, oh, that's creepy, that's gross, don't do that. But you know what I mean? Like, I
it's
don't
hard
know.
to
It
stay
seems,
balanced.
yeah, like there's a lot of like, I don't know, this past year when I get to know people who on Twitter and they'll tell me stuff in DMs and stuff, and like there's a lot of like weird, creepy sexual family cults in this country. Like I know
I've
several people, you should hear the stories of how they were raised in Ontario. And these are people that have told me. Like, look at the Boys of St. Vincent. Look at that school in Kingston, Ontario that just only closed in like 2016. And it was known for sexually abusing people. And we got the teacher at St. Matt's High School here in Ottawa that my friend's kids, we've said for 10 years, that teacher so-and-so, he's a little creepy. I'll stay away from him. Like, I mean, it's part of hockey culture. Sorry. But junior hockey has a very big problem with rape culture. It's a fact. Hockey Canada has come out and talked about it. They've got to deal with it. So I'm a little bit reluctant sometimes to call it wokeism when to me it's just the unevolved human beings who are still walking this planet, because we're eventually going to evolve out of that being okay. I mean, doctors used to think they could put a nail in your ear and that was going to solve your fever. Like, like they're like we don't believe snake oil salesmen anymore. So I think there's a lot more sexual creeps across the board than
You caught me off guard. I don't know too much on this, but apparently Wolf does. Went right up to the White House in the 80s with underage boy escorts in the White House. Wolf, I'd be curious to know how you know that, and how old were
It,
you in the 80s?
no, there is like there's stories out there of people who were staffers in the White House who are so much older now and have come out and talked about it. Like that one guy who had a sexual tryst with Obama. Like he did a polygraph test.
What was his
And
name? Mike?
yeah, he's like done crack cocaine with him back when he was a senator in Chicago, and like he did a whole polygraph test. He went on Tucker and talked about it, and it's like what? Like
Wolf, he's
Wolf,
claiming.
Wolf, I hope you follow me. Your name rings a bell though. I read about it. I'll post receipts. One moment. Yeah, no, I believe you.
I'm still of the mind that Wolf. It's not that he read about it; he might have been involved in this somehow. I know the guy; he's a great guy.
Yeah, no, there's just been like I remember in the 90s, like that St. Vincent. I knew I was friends with someone whose father was defense counsel for that team. So I'm from Ottawa, man. We have a lot of good hockey players that came out of Ottawa. I got a lot of friends who hung around hockey players. I know reality of what happens in these worlds. And so I find it a little bit weak of Canadians to sit there, no offense to you, but to point the finger when we're a disgusting race when it comes to how we treat women on our own. And I speak as a woman who wasn't hard to look at in my 20s. So I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. So anyone who tries to say we're better here, I would disagree.
No, that's fine. I just
posted two still relevant. Yeah. Perfect.
I'm it's not my area of expertise. So you brought up the Catholic Church. Like I didn't really look into it very much.
But you
what
know
happened.
that stereotype exists, right?
Oh, I know it exists, but I don't know what. Like RFK Jr. said that the percentage of priests, ministers that were engaged in that relative to the full size of the clergy was relatively low. So it wasn't like 50% of them were molesting. I'm not excusing them.
No.
I just don't know enough to compare that with what's going on in England right now.
Yeah, no, the issue was just my main point was that it's not really wokeism. It's just historical human nature, in my belief. I don't think there's any culture that's been any worse or better off than any other one. I think that we've just evolved a little bit faster in us, recognizing that's not okay, or that's disgusting, or that's gross. Because we gave women more rights over here to speak up against this stuff, right?
But
Right?
I feel like it's not even a women's rights thing. It's a common sense thing. My neighbor here has a daughter. She's like 9 or 10. I don't really feel comfortable talking to her for too long without her mom there. It's just something about a man. Like you're supposed to know your boundaries. So I don't know what's wrong with these people that don't know their boundaries and they're molesting children. Like there's something wrong with them.
Oh, for sure there is. Oh yeah, there's some and there's a lot. And I really believe they're part of the evolutionary scale with the knuckle draggers, and then it kind of goes up and they start standing upright towards the end. These guys are a few down.
They devolve at the end. They go back to
I think they branched off, right? Like they've done some research now. There were Neanderthals, there were Denisovians, and then we have the Homo sapiens. Like there's been a few more species that they thought that they've come out with, right? Since 2016. So I think that they may have gone more the Neanderthal route. Some of them are still dragging their knuckles. And you'll notice too, a lot of them, old cavemen, the ones that are like cavemen line, you can tell because they eat and they got their arm protecting their food. You ever seen men still do that?
Do they grunt and groan and they're looking around?
No, they don't grunt, but you'll know, like I'm watching people in restaurants all the time. Like I'm like the people I'm with, they can keep talking, and even if I don't like the conversation, like I'm always watching. I have this thing with human behavior. I'm fascinated with it. I could watch humans all day. I literally, cafes in Paris are like my favorite place on the planet because you're all facing outwards and you just people watch all day. It's amazing. Um, yeah, I've people watched
Oh,
and
there you
I
go. Wolf to the rescue. He's using science to prove your argument. Caucasians have 2 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. There you go. The
see
ones that
some
have
cases up to
4%.
10%. See?
There you go. The 10% are the ones you're
See,
talking
Wolf,
about.
you and I should consider doing something together. You can be like my fact checker. Like every time I say something, because I've usually got something to back it up. Like I usually don't talk unless I've like read something about it. And if I've read it, I understand it. I usually remember it. That's kind of how I work. But he can be the one to follow up. See, I've done way too much research on DNA and blood types and yeah, I because of my observations of how people Native Africans have close to zero exactly, and Native Africans also have zero with Rh negative blood. No O negative, no A negative, no B negative, no AB negative. From evidence, there is no explanation as to where Rh negative blood comes from if we are to believe Darwin's theory that all humans are out of Africa. Fascinating stuff. I'm O negative blood. Only reason why I know about it. I'm that person can give to everybody, but can take from nobody. So when everybody was calling themselves pure blood because they weren't vaccinated, I was like, shut up. I'm O negative. If you get into an emergency, you're going to need my blood.
You should get a T-shirt for that.
Shut up. You still want my blood.
Yeah.
But to your point about RFK and the women, that 2 to 5%, whatever it wasn't some astronomical number. The exact same thing would be said by those on the left about the COVID vaccine. Most of the, we're all still alive.
I see what you mean. The
2 to
vaccine
5%.
injured. Yeah.
I didn't fare so well with the vax because there are side effects, right?
Yeah. I see where you're going with that.
That's how some people on the left will think. That's all I'm saying. Like that's how they're perceiving it, even though you and I know it's what they did was wrong and all the science that's shown that there's evidence and issues.
I know we said we were going to end it like 20 minutes ago, but this is really good. I feel that so December 2020 is when things really went crazy. Like 2019 was still kind of normal. So it's been 4 years. And now the people who were hardcore vaccine enthusiasts, they supported all the lockdowns. They're starting to wake up. And I think it's because they're getting vaccine injured and inflation is hitting them.
So I can tell you for Ottawa, the people I've talked to in Ottawa, because Ottawa is a very big supporter of this vaccine, as you know. Anybody who worked in Ottawa, you had some form of affiliation with the feds. So you were doing what you were told. If you're not a lobbyist or government worker or consultant or like Ottawa is literally, Washington of Canada, right? So nobody in Ottawa was really saying too much. Ottawa is very groupthink, go with the flow. Capital cities around the world, I've done a little bit of research on this, traditionally have a larger population of groupthink. It's very, very common around the world. And so they played the government and the officials and those powers that be well above Justin Trudeau that have, made these regulations and these rules and that, they understood that. Right? They understood all of the psychology that was going to manipulate Canadians, and Canadians were just going to go along with it. Right? I've totally forgot what I was going to say.
I was talking about how they've finally woken up because of vaccine injuries. You were talking.
So people in Ottawa, there we go. Sorry, thank you. People in Ottawa are talking one-on-one about it now. So I had flags on my car early in the convoy, and oh my God, like fingers, people yelling at me, like super mad, very triggered by a Canadian flag on my car. It was quite the social experiment. I would put it on just to watch people respond because it was fascinating. that somebody could, like, something so simple as your country's flag could cause such rage. And people who worked at the courthouse, I remember driving by the courthouse before any of the trials had even started, and somebody who worked in the courthouse was like, "We want our flag back." Pardon? So, but now I talk to a lot of people, random places, grocery stores. Like, I will just start a conversation because I am such a fanatic when it comes to behavioral analysis. It's just like, it's an issue. Okay. Like, my friends were calling me the life theorist in high school. Like, I was analyzing, anyways. Um, they have now started doing research. I will go against your vaccine injured comment because I don't, just for Ottawa, because I don't think Ottawa got all full doses, right? You know how there was different batches? And I think you weren't going to send, I think saline and stuff may have ended up at some places just so that we didn't have like government officials collapsing, or, you know, it's questionable about how the needle went in, or did it go in, and some of the videos that we saw of some of the people getting vaccinated, right? Like, this is all very questionable stuff. For Ottawa, I think there's enough people who started just reading by virtue of they work for the government, and instead of actually like doing their work, they're on the internet and stuff, and there's just a lot more information out there about vaccine injuries, and, you know, like different results that were hidden by Pfizer, you know, different things like that we weren't privy to before, that was blocked.
So let me rephrase what I said. I'm not saying it's a bioweapon or people are like dying left, right, and center.
No, but some people are. Some people do actually believe to that level.
I know that's because they've just been harmed by their government. I go
Yeah.
to a family dinner and like a mom is complaining that her daughter can't get into university because she has to compete with the foreign students that pay more.
Yes.
Like that's government policy that she voted for. She voted for liberals. She deserves that pain,
Yeah.
but she realizes deep down she made a mistake. I took another woman 2 nights ago, same thing, but from the U.S. So instead of East Indians, it's Mexicans. They have the exact same problem there. DEI, right? You fast track the
Yeah.
poor, and the rich get in, but the middle class gets
But
screwed.
that's why the liberals brought in so many immigrants, right? Those that could stay because they could secure the vote based on loyalty. I've spoken to many
Yep.
new Canadians who they do feel a loyalty to vote liberal because he brought them over. A lot of them have told me that their children don't feel those same loyalties, though. So we're going to start seeing maybe an evolution of that if we do finally slow immigration down. But it seemed like a pretty good strategy by the Dems and the Liberals to bring in immigrants to increase their
Yeah.
voter base, for
Because
sure.
once you break that dam, so let's say I'm pro-immigration, you're anti-immigration, and if I win an election cycle and I bring in 1 million immigrants, like you're screwed. You're screwed. You've already lost the war because every one of those 1 million immigrants, I'm going to say legally Purdy hates your guts. She wants you dead. She hates your kids, and they're all going to vote for me. They'll be like, "Well, Payman Ascari is showing me respect as a human being. Legally Purdy apparently hates me, and they're just not going to vote for you." And then the next election cycle, you have to do what Brian Mulroney did: be like, shout from the rooftops, "Hey, I love immigrants. Let's bring more in."
Yeah, no, it's, you know, the whole immigration argument's been around though since the 80s. You know, there's been fear of this for so long, and it's almost like we cried wolf for so many years, and then now it's like, actually no, actually it is a problem now. Like,
That's
you,
also
you know
true.
what
Yeah,
I mean? Like, this whole, the numbers and the, you know, all of that, that you can watch TV shows from the 80s, and it's the same rhetoric. Mind you, they're not drinking coffee, and they're usually smoking a cigarette because it's 80s TV, right? um but remind me to comment on what that person's comment was about it not being fascinating,
what wasn't
because
fascinating?
it
Oh,
was fascinating to me to watch it. Watching the mask mandate affect our kids was far from fascinating. It was troubling. It was pretty fascinating to me, and um, it was conservatives and everybody, PPC will say, I want government out of my house. Okay. So when the mask mandate was happening and people were wearing masks, like it was our job as parents to make sure that our children weren't being affected socially by what was happening. It was our responsibility as parents to talk to our kids every night, tell them what was going on. My doctor was really good. There was a big fear that kids were going to develop OCD because of it. So my doctor was like, whatever you do, when your kids come out of the washroom, if they forget to wash their hands, just leave it. Because there was a huge increase of OCD in kids during COVID. And so there was a lot of things that we could do as parents to make sure they weren't scared and they weren't affected and they didn't get in the way. So when I say I find something fascinating, we can still be fascinated by craziness, but it is still our responsibility as parents to protect our children. So, anybody who doesn't want government involved, when they do get involved negatively, you do what you're supposed to do as a parent to protect your child, to ensure they're not affected by those decisions.
I promise this is the last one from Wolf. Wolf, I'm not putting any more of your
No, children were
messages up.
psychologically harmed in ways that we cannot fully fathom. Again, right? So that's where human behavior comes in. And if people understood human behavior a little bit more, they could have coasted and guided and got their kids through this properly. Their capacity for empathy would have been impaired. Nah, empathy, everyone's born with it. Lack of empathy is actually learned to lose it. I don't care what anyone says. Everyone's born with it.
All right, last one. Man, this is going on forever. The problem is that the authorities and the media work together to spread fear porn. 80% of the parents went along with it because they were misinformed. Thoughts?
Correct. Absolutely. And I good luck. I don't think the government's going to be able to get away with it again. Good luck. I think that we have woken up. So really quickly, I never thought, so as somebody who's had the Juno Beach Memorial Bridge renamed here in Ottawa to that name, someone who's absolutely a big World War II Operation Overlord junkie, I've been on Juno Beach twice. I've never understood how people fell for propaganda. I was always like, how do they do that? Like, are you so dumb to believe a flyer flying out of the sky and you pick it up and you're like, oh, I'm going to believe this. I never understood how people fell for it. And then COVID. And I was like, wow, I was terrified. Because I had friends in Asia, so I saw those early videos of Chinese people collapsing on the street. So I'm one of those people annoyed that my government hasn't done anything to stop this. So it's just a big circle for me. But yeah. Sorry, I start to lose my train of thought after we've been talking for too long. I'm usually really well focused. But then I have what else do I want to say? What else should I have said? Because I know we're going to cut her off here pretty soon. But I think that Canadians experienced propaganda for themselves. And that's what's going to change some of what's going to happen in the future. So they're going to be a little bit more strategic if they want to manipulate us again. They're going to have to be different, because the people I talk to just randomly, I'll be like, hey, if they ever make us go into lockdowns, you doing that again? They're like, hell no. I will randomly ask people stuff on the street. I really don't care. I'll be at the store and be like, so would you vaccinate? No, I'm not getting another one. Okay. I'm just curious, And I will ask people, just because I'm so curious as to what people are thinking, because I've learned Twitter is not reality.
I was talking to my dad the other day, and he's like, I will not get another vaccine. I'm like, bro, you got 4 already. Can you even legally get more?
Your dad has 4?
Yeah, 4. I didn't even know. You can't. Can you get more than 4? Is there a limit?
I think there's 7.
Jeez.
Yeah, because you
At
had
that
like
point,
you had your 2, and then you had your booster in 2022 or 23, and then you had your couple. Yeah. They're up there.
Jesus Christ.
So I mean, I didn't get
Well,
my flu shot before COVID happened because I think it was 2014. They only got the shot like 7% accurate. It's right on Ottawa Public Health
you know,
like website, and they only
like
got 7. I was like, nah, I don't think I need to give myself a vaccine for the flu. If you know you might be getting it right, might not be getting it right. I'm good.
I've always lived my life on the edge. Like when I go on vacation to some third world country like Cuba and there's a sign that says don't drink the tap water, I'm like, I'm drinking the tap water. I'm not walking down the lobby with a hangover. Whenever it's flu season, my mom, she's like, "Did you get the shot?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, totally." And then I come down with like a debilitating flu. But I'd rather suffer like psychological, neurological damage from the flu than going down to the doctor's office to get a shot. Like I
Yeah,
just I live recklessly.
I live recklessly too, and I don't like taking some of those um like the Malarone, for example, for malaria, right? It was like, so I ended up getting malaria because I didn't take the Malarone. I got it in Thailand. Anyways, long story. Gong show getting treated in Korea, but man, they treated that real quick. They knew that I had people holding me up. I was so out of it. My fever was like 103. I was so out of it. I had 3 people have to hold me up to get a chest x-ray. Like that's how sick I was. Oh man, I'd be in China on the road in the street. They'd be like whipping stuff together, and
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
oh, I'm
yeah,
so hungry. Give it to me. I didn't care. I will eat anything. I'm with you. I've had
yeah.
Norwalk. I've had malaria. What else is pretty bad? Never had like any STD or anything like that.
Nor would you divulge that on a
never,
public.
never had like. Well, I was thinking of like hepatitis A and B, like the travel one, and I'm like, oh, but there's also
Oh,
Hep
okay.
C, and then I'm like, no, I've never had any of those. Like, yeah, you'd like to be a paramedic, and I think even the same thing now, which is where the whole craziness comes in. Like, to be a paramedic, you had to be free from like 10 diseases, 10 communicable diseases. And like you can't be a paramedic if you're a diabetic for obvious reasons, right? Can't drive an ambulance, but they got pumps now, so maybe they can now. But back then, you couldn't get a Class F license if you were diabetic. That was just a safety thing. Just like pilots, they won't get a license if they're diabetic or have seizures, for example.
Well, you're in like $1 billion piece of machinery. You can't.
Right?
Someone's like
Right?
epileptic. You can't put them in there.
Except I have a friend who's like the only air traffic controller who's type 1 diabetic, but she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 27 and in year 2 of her ATC training. So they union fought for her because she's so smart and so well that she's the only one in all air traffic controllers in Canada who has type 1 diabetes, who's an air traffic controller. But she's the exception to the rule because she was medically diagnosed after she completed the first year of non-paid, and now she was into her paid training and going into her specialization, and she was diagnosed. Crazy, crazy. Anyways, it was crazy this happened to her because diabetes was like my least favorite call to get as a paramedic. It messed with my head to have somebody unconscious, give them glucagon, and then poof, they're there arguing with you, not wanting to go to the hospital. Like, I do not like medical calls, okay? When there's no trauma and it's just like some makeup inside, I couldn't do it. Anyways, and then my best friend gets diagnosed with type 1, and we traveled the world together, and it was like always had to have juice on us after that, and almost passed out in Versailles. Oh my God, I'm racing through Versailles, stealing orange juice from the fridge in the bougie cafe. I just ran in, grabbed it, cranked it open, and handed it to my friend. And I said, diabetic en français. They're like, oh, okay. And they like totally understood, and they were totally fine with it. If that was Canada, oh my God, the cops would have been called and I would have been arrested for stealing an orange juice, but that's another story.
Yeah, I was gonna say simpler times back then. Nowadays, like you go to jail for life.
Yeah, for protesting. Which,
Although it
by the
wasn't
way,
it.
Pat King's sentencing is next week. Just a quick plug on that before we end. And Helen Bruce is back in court, or back to the tribunal, I should say, on Monday.
Pat King, Helen Bruce. All right,
Next week.
it's
Yeah, next
tune in
week's a
if you
busy
guys
week.
can. Anything else? Who else do we have in jail
There
in
was
Canada?
a Wellington regular who did have something in court today, Brian Dirksen. I'm not too sure what happened. I haven't really been paying attention to too many of them, to be honest. It's very frustrating to just watch lawfare just keep looping and looping and looping, and justice just not being served, in my opinion. So it's anybody that has a moral compass who watches this unfold, it becomes a little bit taxing emotionally, watching these trials unfold and watching obvious gong show. Like,
Yeah. Meanwhile, Gilbo casually puts $250 million in his own personal company. $2 billion goes missing under Freeland, but Helen Bruce did her job, so she's going to jail.
that's what I mean. How do we not have account? Like, we have so much. I would like to actually go through the actual Panama Papers and see which Canadians were actually listed in, what was it, 11 million pages?
11 million?
In that Panama Papers release, how many documents were in that? It was absolutely insane, the amount of reporters who had to work on that. I would like to, because I've only got mainly like the British and the Americans who were on that list. I'd like to know the Canadians.
So I'll tell you a story. I don't even know where to begin. I was at a meeting, a conference, and the president of Estonia was there, and he was giving a speech. And this was right when the Panama Papers leaked. And he turns to the camera and he goes, "Any law firm that doesn't encrypt their documents, in my opinion, they deserve to be hacked."
And he was talking about that Monsanto. What's the name of that company in the Panama? That law firm.
Yeah, well, I don't know what it was, but that's the one he was talking about. That's how they got hacked, right?
They were the amount of documents that came out of that leak, unbelievable. So I'm very curious to see which Canadians are on that. I'm going to actually go looking into it, because the documentaries that have been done focus on American and British and Aussie, believe it or not. There's not a lot of Canadian reporters who have really looked into the Canadians who were on that or involved in those documents. So I'm going to go do a hunt. Maybe I've missed it, and somebody will correct me if listening to this. But I'd be very curious to see who our elected officials are that are like Gilbo, that are putting money into these shell companies. And it's going to take a lot. It's hard to find them. That's the thing. That's why it's brilliant. They're hiding all of this money from us. It's gross.
I always wonder, we all assume that our politicians are corrupt, and we always assume that somehow money is getting from, Pfizer to Justin Trudeau, but we never know exactly the mechanics of how. So I'd be interested to know how that happens.
Yeah, that's the part that I'm trying to figure out. That's and I think a lot of it's coming from that city of London, that 1 square mile that I've been researching. That's very, very, it's very bizarre what goes on in there.
Do you know a girl named Salty Canuck?
I do. I know who she is on Twitter. Yeah.
So I don't really know her that well, but I think she went on this epic rant about the city of London. 80% of the financial transactions go through
40.
that 1 square mile. 40. Okay.
40% of the legal.
I was only off by 100%.
Yeah, no. But I would say, so they think 40% of the world's financial transactions, but all of the rules and regulations and what they accept and not going to accept, like HSBC getting away with what they got away with, is because they're too big to fail. And that decision to let them get away with it would have been made in that 1 square mile. Do you see what I'm saying? So that in that 1 square mile is where all the decisions that allow things like tax evasions, like Gibraltar and all those islands off the UK that don't have to actually operate under UK law. It's absolutely mind-bending what goes on in that 1 square mile.
Have you ever been there?
I have actually never been to the UK, and I've been to like over 30 countries, and I've never been to the UK. It's never
So
interested me for some
if you go
reason.
to the city of London, like you just 4:59, you're standing there 5 o'clock. All of these suits come out and they start getting hammered at the pubs. It's like 2 million men in suits.
Oh yeah, I've heard that, and that's like that'd be so much fun for me just to people watch because the most uh, uh the highest concentration of spies are still in London.
Really?
Yeah, true story. Isn't that
I didn't
crazy?
know that.
I would,
I wouldn't
yeah,
have figured.
I would love to just sit back and just watch all of it unfold. Yeah, the highest number of spies are still operating
I
out of
didn't know
London
that.
in the world. Yeah. And we only have like 172 or 176 registered Chinese diplomats. Meanwhile, there's over like 2,000 of them gathering everyday intelligence just by sitting in our courtroom in Ottawa.
You mean the Chinese are gathering evidence?
Oh, yeah. Big time. Big time. So remember when Mark Miller, when they announced that they were going to cut back on the immigration, and then
I
in
remember.
committee
Yeah.
he was attacked by a Chinese person a few months ago, saying I'm the person that you want to lead. No. Remember he was attacked physically, like bullied around in committee by a Chinese person. Okay, not a Canadian citizen, a Chinese person.
Jesus.
I take issue with that. You're not a Canadian citizen. Get out of my government. You don't have a right to vote. Get out of there. You don't have a point being there. When I lived
I
in
never
South
heard about
Korea, I
that.
didn't involve myself in South Korean politics. I didn't participate in protests. When I lived in Greece, I didn't get involved in their government. Right? You just do your thing. You mind your own business. That's what you do when you go to a new country. Keep your head down and do your thing. No?
No, you're right. And I've gone to countries and they start trash talking their president. And I've said straight up, I'm like, listen, I'm a guest in this country. I don't
Yeah.
want to
Don't get me in on
share my
this. Like,
opinion.
I don't
Yeah.
want to like cause any problems, like
Yeah.
for sure. But what did we just say before that?
Courts, there are thousands of hours in the courts they're listening in on the spies in England.
So the guy shows up at Mark Miller's committee. Then a couple of weeks ago in Barhaven here in Ottawa, Nepean, there's talks about building a temporary shelter for refugees out there. So they have a local council meeting or local, just local council representatives there to discuss this upcoming refugee intake center. And who gets up on the stage and starts protesting and yelling and making a big deal? Chinese guy.
That was the same guy?
Different guy.
Okay.
Different
There are a
guy.
lot of them.
But Chinese, okay? No, but again, they're disrupting, right? Think about it. There are people who are from foreign countries sitting in our courtrooms watching what's happening. Why? Because they are learning our entire process. Our entire process. What case law is going to be argued, what works, what doesn't work, judge's sentiment. You can bribe a judge a lot easier when you know what their weak points are.
Could you imagine like these?
Bribed, just saying there's a lot of hobbyists in the Ottawa courthouse. Seems a little suspicious that they sit there all day, don't earn money, and are not natural Canadians.
They're reporting all this information back to
Absolutely.
Prime Minister or President Xi, and they're like, "Sir, we have bad news. The judges are so corrupt. There's nothing more we can do. The system is already
I think
fully
our judges
corrupt."
are corrupt because of foreign influence.
I think they're corrupt
That's
because
how
of
you
Justin
disrupt the
Trudeau.
country, is you disrupt the judicial. Come on.
People underestimate the importance of a judiciary. Like if the government and the legislature disappeared tomorrow, we'd still be fine. But if the courts disappeared, it's anarchy. It's chaos.
Exactly. It's anarchy.
Should we end it there?
We can.
We've almost gone twice the
As
time.
long.
Yeah.
But it's like so typical of me. Like I'm like, oh, I won't have much to say. We'll just do like 45 minutes, be a quick chat, and then it's like 2 hours later, and we're still yakking. But no, it's fun to engage in like different conversations and just like yik yak and talk and not be pigeonholed into sticking on onto one thing. I know you PPCers want to blame a lot of things on woke, but sometimes you just have to be realistic. And I think it'll be easier to win votes and support if a little bit realistic with some issues. And any woman that's around my age, we get our back up a little bit when we keep hearing it's being blamed on another culture when we've all experienced it amongst our own. Does that make sense?
It does, and you're officially my campaign advisor now.
I had somebody that was going to run NDP when Randy Hillier left his riding. There was a leadership race for the NDP in that section, and somebody reached out to me and said, if I win the leadership, will you run my campaign for me? And he's an NDPer. And I'm not, but I can tell I knew what the NDP needed to do and not do. But NDP have a very big problem with diversity of thought. That's their problem. That is their biggest problem, actually, is they're very pigeonholed. NDPers, the voters, when you talk to them, they mean well. Like, they're not communists. They want, they're middle class people, they just want everyone to be okay, everyone to be treated the same, that's them. And, that's okay. But they're not liberals, which is interesting.
What is the difference? Man, we're going over time again. What is the difference between NDP and liberal in your mind?
Well, I don't really know, to be honest. I think the conservatives are even somewhat similar to them in my personal view, and some of their voting patterns. They kind of all seem the same. They just have different slogans. But when it comes to voting, I think they're very similar. They just have different talking points. But from the people I've spoken to, because again, my riding, very NDP, it's yes or NACV, but very NDP in provincial and that, right? So they're not liberals. And they like to tell you that. So it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe they're cousins. I don't know. I don't know enough about the NDP platform because I don't really understand, because it's always changing. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to understand I don't agree. Like, they don't get some stuff right. Like, they don't understand that our healthcare is already private except for the emergency room and your family doctor. Everything else is out of pocket. So they don't understand. Like, they think that, yeah, that's a whole other conversation. I'm a huge supporter of two-tier healthcare. I have been a supporter of two-tier healthcare since 1998. And I'm batting pretty much 1,000 when I have a good one-on-one conversation to people about why two-tier healthcare is better. Because there's other countries in the world other than the US that have better healthcare than we do and have a better system than we do. South Korea is one of them. France is another one. There's amazing ways of operating our healthcare system that is a little bit better. And right now, because it's communist and you have to take what the government gives you, and I will say that, I'll stand by that, we have corruption. We have board of directors in hospitals, like the Ottawa Hospital, for example. The top two board members make a combined income of $1.2 million. Someone needs to explain to me how the hell that's the province's fault or the Fed's fault when the local hospital is paying their board members $1.2 million.
Interesting times that we live in.
Right? So that we could talk about healthcare, and we could have a whole other podcast. The NDP do not, and they refuse to understand that the elite are already taking their spots in line. So if they want to avert that, they need to give the elite somewhere else to go. Private, right? Think about it. If the elite are jumping the system, jumping the queue, give them somewhere else to go to free up your queue. Understand? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, no, I support a two-tier system. Obviously, that's the PPC platform.
Yeah.
But even like before I joined the PPC, at the very least, I was like, this doesn't make sense. If somebody wants to get an X-ray and there's not enough time, like let them pay out of pocket. I believe England does this. England
Quebec
does
and
it.
Alberta do. You can pay for an MRI in Alberta and Quebec. Those two provinces allow for it. So, and that's actually evidence, and to my point about two-tier healthcare helping. So here in Ottawa, I only waited 6 weeks for my MRI. Why? Because all the rich assholes went off to Quebec and got one the next day. So if you live in Ottawa, you're going to get an MRI faster than somebody who lives in Kingston, because Kingston people are less likely to drive to Quebec. It's only $795 to get an MRI next day in Quebec. Everyone in Ottawa who's got insurance or got money, I'm telling you, they just go to Quebec. They go to Gatineau. 20 minutes downtown, across the bridge, get their MRI. And all of us who can't afford the $800, we get into our free clinics faster because we've given the rich people a place to go.
Arnold Haino says, as a former hospital board member, he believes you're spot on.
I'm actually usually spot on with everything I say. I usually don't say anything unless I've done the research, but thank you for telling me, because I don't talk out of my ass. I try my best to ensure that the information I've given, I've actually researched it, because you can't get busted for lying if you try to tell the truth all the time, right? You can't get fact checked if you stick to reporting on facts. And I do. Ottawa Hospital, I checked up who the board members were. I went to the Ottawa Sunshine List because in Ontario, that's posted. If you're paid by a public service job, anybody who makes over $100K in Ontario, you're listed on a website. You can check anybody who's publicly funded in Ontario, how much they make. It's available. It's there.
It's
depressing. And I do it all the time. And when we keep blaming the government for our healthcare woes, you're wrong. It's hospitals.
Well, Legally Purdy, let's end it there. Otherwise, we'll go another hour. I wanted to thank you very much for coming on and actually spending so much time with me. So thank you very much.
It was actually fun chatting. It really was. And I love having a calm conversation with somebody who's on the other side of the other side. We don't agree on all things. But it was nice for sure.
Yeah, I've been drinking whiskey the entire time, so it calms me down.
Have you?
No, I couldn't risk that on a live stream. I'd probably start swearing and slurring.
I'm like drinking water. like I don't really drink. I don't drink by myself. I'll only have a drink if we go out or if there's football. If someone's watching football with me, then of course we'll have a couple of beers. But I'm not.
All right. Well, then it's settled. The next live stream we do, we'll just screen share a football game and we get drunk.
Yeah, my team didn't make the playoffs though, and they fired Belichick. Woo.
I'm a computer nerd. I don't do sports unless it's esports.
Okay. Do you play poker?
No, it's too high risk for me. I just play video games.
Yeah, I'm a poker player, but nobody wants to play with me anymore. So if anybody in Ottawa is having a poker game, please let Payman know. I'd like to do a tournament, please.
So guys, go ahead, follow at Legally Purdy and then harass her until she agrees to a poker game.
Exactly. And I actually did cut my bangs yesterday. So remember, I don't know if you saw my tweet, because girls who break up with bad relationships, they go cut all their hair off. Well, right. Our relationship with Justin Trudeau is coming to an end. So I went and became a member of the Fringe and got my fringe.
I wonder if people on the right are going to lose their minds like the women on the left did when Trump got elected. Like when Trudeau finally resigns, these women just start shaving their...
Well, if it's green or blue or whatever, please shave it and start over, please. Like, just for me, I can't. But, my daughter's friends were laughing about people's hair color. I'm like, girl, you know what they used to use to dye hair back in my day? Bingo
Peroxide.
dabber.
Oh, I didn't know
On that
that,
note,
but yeah. No, no, I was gonna say peroxide or something, but yeah, some of these people who have like it just looks lazy, like their pink blue hair looks like green. I'm like, did you just go in the pool and then you didn't wash afterwards?
the only one that actually had really good hair one day, and people are going to get so mad at me for saying this person's name, so you're going to get some hate for this. Dina Sharif dyes her hair Palestine colors, so she does
I don't
like
know
the
that.
sections. And anyways, it looks pretty funny. It looks pretty wild, but whatever. At least it's like properly sectioned. But yeah, we got some pretty special hair in Ottawa. But I'm at like 2% battery because why would a tripod holder have spot for the battery cord? And StreamYard doesn't let you turn your phone upside down.
So we'll see. We'll try to get our best research minds on it and see if we can come up with something.
Sounds good. But
All right.
we'll do another chat. We'll have another chat again.
All right, Legally Purdy. Take care. Have a good day.
Bye now.
Bye.